What's
Yeah,
up?
I like that song, bro.
You can
Put
say
that ad back on. That's way better than anything I'll say.
Yeah, it is. I mean,
That's whew. That was
they're killing. They're
slapping. It was slapping hard.
Yeah, you got your yeehaw, honky tonk. I feel like I move closer to Montana and Yellowstone every time I hear that song.
Yeah, I'm a country guy. I don't know any of the new music that's out, but like country, like 90s country, 2000s, like that was all me. So yeah, I was a big fan of that.
Well, just don't be like Jason Aldean. I think.
Trying to get canceled on here.
I mean, what are you doing? I mean, come on. Anyway, TJ Pittinger, Double Fries, No Slaw, joins as he covers Florida State. I give the floor to you, man. What's this offseason been like? What's the summer been like? What's camp been like? If y'all had it yet, tell us, how's the summer been for Florida State and this football team?
Yeah, pretty good. Mostly quiet. Not a lot of no injuries. Florida State got a couple of pickups at the very early part of summer. Post spring, a couple of folks from you guys' neck of the woods. Destin Hill, Keon Coleman added a little bit to the wide receiver room. But yeah, no trouble. So knock on wood. No injuries, knock on wood. And so camp starts on Thursday. Florida State had a really good July where they picked up 9-10 commitments, and then another one today, all kind of highlighted by the big one on Saturday. Charles Lester, 5-star out of Sarasota, Florida. They are looking forward to another potential 5-star commitment with KJ Bolden announcing on Saturday as well. So yeah, summer's been good. A lot of recruiting. Obviously, that's the time of the year it is, but looking forward to the season. 33 days away, man. We'll be in Orlando ready to get it going.
So let me ask you this. I want to ask you about position groups and then specific players and maybe some things that you're hearing. Keon Coleman is obviously somebody that made a lot of waves because leaving Michigan State, going into Florida State. What can you tell us about the new wide receiver, Keon Coleman?
I mean, I think he just makes Florida State's offense was already going to be really good, right? Like I believe they finished number 10 in the country last year, both in yards per game and like all the advanced metrics. They were right around 10th, and then they brought back like 89% of the offense. They lost one guard. So I think that when you look at the production that they brought back, they were already going to be really nasty. And just adding Keon Coleman probably makes I don't know how any secondary really guards what Florida State tries to do. Now, that's not that they can't get stops, right? Like you could pressure and try and shut down the run and do other things. But man, as far as throwing the ball, if Jordan Travis has time, I don't know how you match up. So I do think he takes the offense to a completely new level. Big kid, would be a number one for a lot of teams in the country. 6'4", great catch radius. He did some nasty things at Michigan State, and so we'll see. We'll see, but I think he makes the offense pretty, knocking on the door of top 5 in the country if all things are clicking.
It's interesting. You did say that, him getting pressure would be a key thing. I think that is the key thing in that LSU matchup. I think LSU's front 7, as an example, maybe if they struggle on the outside, can they get pressure up front? They weren't unable to do that a year ago when Mason Smith went down. You talked about that, Keon Coleman. Let's talk about the entire wide receiver group and adding Jaheim Bell. What are your thoughts on – I know you talked about the receiving core a little bit and how good dynamic they can be, but adding another guy like Jaheim Bell, how big is that?
Well, yeah, it just complements so much of what FSU wants to do, right? Like Florida State is still going to be run first. As much talent as they've got and as many weapons they've got right now, they still want to run the ball. But – what they have incorporated way more is the run-pass option. And so are you going to stack the box? PFF came out with their top 10 running backs for the draft next year, and, oh, by the way, number 1 was Trey Benson. And so are you going to stack the box? And he really didn't play a ton. It certainly came on later in the year, didn't play a ton against LSU, didn't have a lot of stats or attempts. Do you stack the box against him and the threat of Jordan Travis's legs, or do you open it up and give him a chance to go after it? And so anytime that Jaheim Bell and Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson are in the game at the same time, I think it's I think you got to try and double somebody. I mean, Johnny Wilson at 6'7", Jaheim Bell's a matchup nightmare. Keon Coleman in single coverage, I think the Noles really like that there too. And so, yeah, I think that what their weapons do and what Jaheim Bell does is like every piece of the puzzle just complements every other piece so well. And you talked about pressure. They not only have to get pressure, they have to get him down. And if you remember that Florida game last year at the end of the year, there was a lot of pressure on Jordan Travis, but he escaped a lot of stuff and made some highlights. So he's not incredibly, he's not Cam, right? He's not running people over, but I think that his escapability is pretty ridiculous. And so they've got to get him to the ground. If they struggle to get him to the ground, Jordan Travis was top 5 in all of the NCAA last year when under pressure, when getting a pass attempt off, right? So if you're going to get pressure, that's one thing. You got to get him down, right? You got to get to him and get the sack, because if you don't, he's pretty good under pressure too.
When you were saying that, what the first thing I thought about? Harold Perkins.
Yeah.
Like that's going to be a matchup. Can Perkins get there and get him down? Because I know he can get there, and I feel pretty confident that he can get him down. Now that he is inserted into this game, because he did not play a year ago in this game at all other than special teams, do you spy Jordan Travis? Because that I do believe to be key. Is there anything, TJ, though, that worries you offensively?
Yeah, just, what our starters are going to do during the second half, of games. And will they be playing hangman on the sideline, or what, how early will they be checked out of games? No, I'm just playing. I think you just want to make sure that everything gels, right? Like, the talent's there. So I don't worry about depth anywhere. Florida State has 9 offensive linemen that they're super comfortable with. Maybe running back depth a little bit just because Trayshawn Ward transferred out. But, man, they really like Toa Philly. They really like Rodney Hill, who are backing up Trey Benson. And then the guy with the ball, quarterback health is certainly something, that all teams want to make sure they maintain. So I just really think it's about, everything gelling together. Florida State's really confident in their offense. I mean, there are certainly more questions that I have on the defensive side of the ball. On offense, it's about staying healthy and just making sure the thing is cohesive. Remember a couple of years ago when the Warriors had, certainly not calling us the 73-win Warriors, where the Warriors had all that talent, and you were just like, hey, how's that going to work? How's that going to work together? Like, are people going to be okay with getting the ball less? Are people going to be okay with getting less shot? Florida State's got 2 guys at wideout that could be number ones at a lot of places, and Jaheim Bell, who would be the number 1 tight end at a lot of places in this country. Are they okay getting less reps in any given game, in any given month, in any given year? Because, hey, we're going to spread the ball out, and there's a lot of talent out there. So how does it gel together? I don't know. I mean, I feel like I'm almost, not trying to sound overconfident in the offense, but, yeah, I feel really good about it, and I think that I certainly have more questions on the defensive side of the ball.
So listen, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. This isn't because you were on. I know the clip kind of went a little viral with me saying I'm more worried about Florida State than I am Alabama. A key part of that is the defensive line that Florida State has with Braden Fisk. You got Lovett. You have Jared Verse, obviously. So I want to keep it there for just a minute and hold on to that question for you. You said that you have more worries defensively. What are those worries? Because I do think you did get a really good corner in Finchel Cypress, but so what are those worries that you have?
Yeah, I think safety depth is a little bit of a concern. They really like their starters with Akeem Dent and Shaheem Brown, backing those guys up. It sounds like they're going to move Greedy Vance from nickel back to safety. There's also some younger guys that are playing back there in the secondary that just, let's see how they're able to perform. Safety depth is certainly a concern. Linebacking depth, it's really the same linebacking crew that we had last year, and they were able to stay pretty healthy all year. But if 1 or 2 guys go down throughout the year, that could be a position of concern. Now, Florida State definitely plays more like 4-2-5 as opposed to having like your traditional 4-3 defense out there. So you can kind of get away with some of that, the way that Florida State plays. But still, if you lose one or two pieces there at linebacker, Florida State's got two really, really good linebackers in Kalen DeLoach and Tatum Bethune. And then they really like DJ Lundy, too, as kind of their third linebacker. But if one or two of those guys were to go down, man, you'd probably be hurting pretty bad there at linebacker. You mentioned defensive line. I do really like the line. But, yeah, I mean, I'd like to see how the safeties do. I think Cypress is going to be really, really good. I think they like what they've got out of the corners. I think it's just seeing it all come together. Secondary was certainly a liability last year for the Noles. I thought they did a pretty good job in the LSU game, but secondary was a concern, and supposedly they've taken a step forward this year. But I want to see that before I'm ready to write it in stone.
Yeah, and you mentioned that, TJ, because you have two freshmen backing up those guys at safety, and you have a sophomore that's starting there too, if I'm not mistaken. So I look, we talk about the front part of this, and we're going to get to that in just a second. If there's one area that I worry about this team, I think you nailed it. I think it is safety. But it's interesting to hear you talk about the linebackers because you have two seniors that are at that position in DeLoach and Bethune. Is it just the depth, or are you worried about those two seniors specifically?
No, I like those guys a ton. I think Tatum and Caleb do a phenomenal job. I actually like DJ Lundy as well. Kalen is so much like they both kind of quarterback the defense, though. And if either one of those guys were to go down, I think the drop off to who is behind them is pretty stark. Now, again, Florida State kind of plays a little bit more 4-2-5 and nickel and dime, and it's a passing league, so yeah, that's pretty traditional anyway. But I think that most of the concern is with the depth. I like the frontline guys. We don't really have a ton behind them outside of talented young guys, but it's a lot of youth there in the depth pieces.
Let's get to defensive line. So I said this in the piece. I think that, well, let me ask you, because I bring on guests because you cover the team more than I do, and I want you to make your bones about it because you cover them every day. But let's take Georgia out of the equation because I don't think that that's fair. Besides Georgia's, is Florida State a top 3 D line?
Man, I've seen them projected anywhere from 1 to 5, including Georgia, right? And so I would say 3 is probably about right. To be very fair, I've not studied every defensive line in the country, so don't come at me in the comments if you're a fan of some random team that I'm not thinking about. But, yeah, I mean, with Braden Fisk getting the number 1 defensive tackle transfer in the portal, bringing back Fabian Lovett, who was, fifth-year senior, guys played a ton, hasn't stayed healthy, but
he's a dude.
Nasty. Also having Josh Farmer, who Georgia tried to tamper for and got shut down because we increased his NIL. Like, dudes on the defensive line. They're waiting on Daryl Jackson's waiver to hopefully get approved or not. They really love their depth at defensive tackle. And then just to add in, they also have Jared Verse out there, who I think is going to be the top edge rusher off the board this year in April. And they have the ACC Freshman of the Year in Patrick Payton, who is phenomenal. They picked up Gilbert Edmond, who I know you guys in Florida were like. They've got legit talent all over that defensive line that is just super impressive, super deep. Not only super deep, but like super star talent, powerful. I mean, I certainly think they're the best in the ACC. It's been a long time since you could say somebody else other than Clemson is the best in the ACC when it comes to a defensive line. And I'm not even really that, like if you ask me who has the better offensive line, I'd be like, it's a coin flip either way, us or Clemson. I'm pretty confident we have a better defensive line than Clemson. And that's just ridiculous. For anyone to claim that ever with how good Clemson does their on D line, I think it's pretty ridiculous.
TJ, in studying both of these teams, here will be just my opinion. Take injuries out of it during camp. I know you can't, but we don't know the players that may go down. I think you have 2 front sevens that are pretty freaking good, dude. Like, I mean, I would not be shocked if this game's 24-21 either team. Like, yeah. I do think that both of these front sevens are nasty. Now, when you look at this game from a holistic perspective, where do you see this leaning towards?
Yeah, I think the two big things that it comes down to are some of the things we talked about. I think that both teams are going to get theirs, right? Like, and so I do. I think it's going to be close in that regard, right? Whether it's 21-24 or 27-31 or something like that, right? Like, I think it's somewhere within there. The two matchups that I think are most important are two of the ones that we've talked about. Can LSU find a way to how does LSU's secondary match up against Florida State's weapons? And then the other matchup, is LSU's front seven? Because to me, the two biggest matchup problems are probably LSU's front seven with Harold Perkins, the dynamic athlete that he is, against FSU's offensive line, and then as well, Florida State's wideouts and what they're able to do against the LSU secondary. Obviously, if LSU's front seven can dominate and it doesn't let Jordan Travis get stuff off to the wideouts, then that matchup is minimized. But I think those are really where the game comes down to. If Florida State can take advantage on the outside, and if LSU can kind of dominate the line of scrimmage, then I think that's where the game is going to be won and lost.
You're confident, and I'm serious in asking this because you said you're pretty confident in the O-line too, correct?
Yeah, I think Florida State really likes what they have at offensive line. I still think you can like what you have at offensive line as much as you want, but like a Mason Smith and a Harold Perkins, like it doesn't really matter. I mean, it's got to be like the Ravens 2000 offensive line to stop those.
Well, it's like Jared Verse.
Yeah. So same kind of idea. Like, right. I really like the offensive line, and they're probably one of the better, them or Alabama, probably one of the better offensive lines that LSU will see all year. But, at the same time, it's still Harold Perkins. It's still Mason Smith. Like, that's really tough. So I do think Mike Norvell does a really good job of scheming, not only to get guys open, but also, him and Alex Atkins do a really good job of recognizing coverages and recognizing blitz packages and having to kind of realize what happens there. But I mean, still, like, those guys are just freak athletes, and sometimes freak athletes do freak things. I mean, Jared Verse did it last year in the game as well, blocking a field goal, getting a bunch of sacks, like he did in the video game we played and stuff too. Sometimes the guy just goes off. So yeah, I think that sometimes dynamic athletes they just do crazy good things.
I agree. I do like what you said. I think it comes down to LSU's front seven. They added Omar Spates in there too, who won like the Iron Tiger Award, the best offseason or non-playing portion of the year, as I like to call it. But nevertheless, I do think you nailed the two position groups. Moving into your season. So yesterday, just letting you know, I'm not saying this because you're on here. I texted you this morning. Didn't even know that you were coming on the show, so you can back me up on that. I think that you're going to win the ACC. Okay? What do you got to do it? I mean, I know that you got to beat Clemson, but outside of Clemson, anything else you're worried about?
Yeah, to me, it's just I don't want to say I don't care if we don't beat Clemson, but to me, it's not even beating Clemson. It's just not getting tripped up anywhere else. Because if you lose to Clemson, we don't have divisions anymore. So we still go to the ACC championship. And so if you get tripped up against Clemson, you just got to win out, right? Like, you can't lose to Miami, you can't lose to Pitt, you can't lose to Wake, you can't lose, and they shouldn't lose to any of those teams. And so honestly, the Clemson game, it certainly matters. I don't want to say that it doesn't matter, but the Clemson game doesn't even really matter. Like, you just got to not get tripped up against any of the other crap in the ACC. And if you do that, you go to Charlotte and you get a chance to play them on a neutral field. And you see what happens from there. So yeah, you're going to have to beat them at least once, but the game earlier in the year, again, I don't want to say that it doesn't matter, but it certainly doesn't matter as much as the game in Charlotte that you hope to be in. Especially
if your goal is just to win the ACC, right? Like,
yeah, for sure.
You lose to LSU, like, okay, whatever, because both of those teams, relatively, LSU winning the West, Florida State competing to win the ACC last year. So that's a crazy part to me, because some of these, you're like, well, you still got a little length. And you know what's so wild, TJ? Next year, okay, it won't matter if you lose those two in the regular season, because you're probably going to get in the playoff anyway if you win 10 games and you're in that conference. Yeah. Going around the ACC, I know that you love Florida teams. I know that you love Miami. Let me ask you this: is Texas A&M going into Miami week 2 and clapping them cheeks, or what?
Man, it's Texas A&M is the most the biggest enigma to me, right? Like Texas A&M could go 6-6, or they could go 9-3, right? Like, or they could go 4-8, right? Like there's a huge run. Like we all know, like we can just be family for a minute. We all know Florida's going to suck this year, right? Like we all know the Florida ceiling is 6 wins and their floor is 4 wins, right? Like that's not like I'm not breaking any ground there with that. Like we all know that, don't we?
I am not confident on them, no.
Yeah, like Florida's going to suck. A&M could win anywhere from 4 to 9 games. Like that's crazy. Like, so I don't know. I think A&M's better, but man, they sure got to step out and prove it. So I think A&M wins that game, but it wouldn't shock me at all if Miami finds a way to win it. I think Van Dyke, when healthy, I think he plays fairly well. He didn't last year against them. I expect A&M to be better. I expect Miami to be better this year, though, too. So I don't know. I would pick A&M at this point, but nothing will shock me between those two crap hole programs.
So if it plays out exactly like you said and Billy Napier goes 6-6 again, what happens?
I think as long as they're not at 6-6, I don't think they're firing him either way. So it doesn't really matter. As long as he keeps DJ Lagway committed, I think he'll be fine. If he loses DJ Lagway, he's in hot water. Because I think you can, I think that Florida is tired of doing the every 3-year thing, but they also have like ridiculous expectations. And so he's also, I think the worst thing that could have happened for Napier is what Norvell did last year, right? Norvell won 3 games and then 5 games, and then boom, 10. Well, Florida ain't winning 10 games this year. And their schedule next year gets even tougher. They certainly aren't winning 10 next year either. And so, Brian Kelly went to LSU, and how many did they win in year 1, right? And then Lincoln Riley went out, and how many did they win in year 1? And Mike Norvell was able to turn it around fairly quickly, right? And so I think that if he can keep Lagway committed and they can show some kind of progress, right? Like if they win 6 this year and they can find a way to scrape by and win like 7 in year 3, which that's not even me being a hater. Like their schedule in year 3 is ridiculous. They got to play UCF, they got to play Miami, and they got to play Florida State, as well as the rest of the SEC schedule that they have every year, right? And so
Georgia, Tennessee.
Yeah, so I think they play Oklahoma. So, yeah, I think that schedule is really tough next year. And so they're not – I mean, honestly, I think that if they could find a way to win 6 games this year and 6 games next year, I know that's not – 6 wins 3 years in a row is certainly not what you have signed up for. But I think they should at least give him 2025 in that scenario because as long as his recruiting stays up, they got the number 3 class right now, right? So it takes time to get your guys in and get them developed and get them going. So I think they should give him a chance. But, yeah, it's certainly not going to be easy over there.
TJ Pittinger, double fries, no slaw. Thank you so much, buddy, for joining us. Let everybody know where they can catch you.
Yeah, double fries, no slaw, anywhere, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We are doing a tailgate for the game, so if you are coming to that, hit me up, hit Blake up. He'll get you my info. My email is real hard. It's tj@doublefriesnoslaw.com. So if you want to come to the tailgate and hang out with a bunch of FSU fans that'll only give you a little bit of crap, but then have a bunch of booze and